Let me ask you something. If Africa has 55 countries, 1.5 billion people, and one continental body meant to protect all of them, why does it feel like it barely works? Because someone inside the system just said it out loud, not in public, not for headlines, in a closed room full of intelligence chiefs.
I can tell you without an iota of doubt that Africa Union as is today is not fit for purpose.
And then he said something even more dangerous.
I want to tell you that there is a lot of resistance to the reform of the Africa Union.
Think about that. The people who ask for reform are the same people blocking it. So here is the real question. Who is the African Union actually built for? You or the people running it? Stay with me, because once you see how the system really works, you won't look at African politics the same way again. But to understand why someone would resist reforming the AU, we first need to understand what the AU was actually built to be. The African Union was born in 2002. It replaced the old OAU, the Organization of African Unity, which had been around since 1963. The vision was big, beautiful, bold, 55 countries, one continental voice, driving peace, integration, democracy, trade. They even built a roadmap called Agenda 2063. The Africa we want. And on paper, the machinery actually looks solid. There is a Peace and Security Council, a Pan-African Parliament, an African Court of Justice in theory at least, the African Free Trade Area. Real machinery. But here is what I always say about machinery. It only works if people actually run it. And if it doesn't get rusty, you know the Swahili proverb, haraka haraka, haina baraka. Moving in a rush has no blessings. Well, the African Union has the opposite problem. It doesn't rush anywhere. Sometimes it barely moves at all. Well, here is what I want you to genuinely think about right now. You, wherever you're watching from, Lagos, Douala, Nairobi, Accra, somewhere in the diaspora. Name one thing the African Union has done for your life, directly, personally, in the last 5 years. Because that one question is entirely the reform debate in one sentence, and it connects directly to what Ruto said in that closed room. Now, some people watched that video and thought, brave man. Some thought, classic political talk. But here's what I thought people missed. There are actually 3 things packed in that one speech, each one more interesting than the last. First, he said his fellow head of states gave him this assignment, which means the problem isn't a secret at the top. The presidents of Africa collectively told Ruto, go fix this, they already know it's broken. Second, he used the phrase, not fit for purpose. Now, that's specific language. It means the structure, the funding, the processes, they were built for a world that no longer exists. Third, and this is the one I keep coming back to, he said there is a lot of resistance. And he deliberately didn't say who. Now, listen, when a sitting president says there is resistance in front of intelligence chiefs and doesn't say a single name, that is not carelessness, that is a message. You see, he knew exactly who was in that room. So let's name them. Because in this reform story, there are 3 groups with both the motive and the power to keep things exactly as they are. Now, let's go one by one. Let's think about this purely from an incentive angle. The AU has leaders who have been running their countries for 20, 30, even 40 years. See, I'm not here to judge anyone's politics. I really mean that. But just think through the logic with me. If you are a leader who's been in power for 3 decades, what exactly do you gain from an AU that has strong accountability systems? Annual rule of law reviews, democracy scorecards published for everyone to see, independent panels that can name and shame governments. Not much. And what do you lose? Quite a bit. You see, the African Union already has rules on paper. The African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Article 30 of the African Union Constitutive Act. no unconstitutional changes of government. You see, these frameworks exist, but a framework without no enforcement is just a suggestion. You see, Ruto's reforms package include things like annual governance reviews, a working African Court of Justice, and automatic escalation when democracy starts to slide. That's not bureaucratic tinkering. That's a fundamental shift in who the AU answers to. You see, right now, the AU answers to presidents. Real reform would make it answer to something bigger than presidents. Can you feel why certain people in that room might have been uncomfortable? But the president's discomfort is just part of the story, because there is something else going on. Now, this is the part that genuinely makes me pause. Follow the money. According to research from ECTPM and ISS Africa, between 60 to 70% of the EU's program budget comes from outside Africa: the EU, China, the United States. Now let me ask you a question. If I pay 70% of your rent, do I have zero say in how you live in that apartment? Of course not. And here is something most people have completely forgotten. In 2017, it was discovered that the African Union headquarters building in Addis Ababa had been bugged. Chinese intelligence services had allegedly installed surveillance equipment inside walls of that building. The building that China donated to the AU. The building that China designed and built. Africa's most sensitive continental conversations being listened to from inside the building that was gifted to Africa. Look, I'm not singling out China here. Geopolitics is a contact sport. The US does this. France definitely does this. Every major power plays this game. The point is structural. When your institution is built with someone else's money, designed by someone else's architect, and your conversation might be reaching someone else's ears. How independent is your position when Burkina Faso gets sanctioned, when Mali gets suspended, when Niger gets cut off? Now, some analysts, and I think this deserves to be taken seriously, have argued that external pressure played a role in how ECOWAS and the AU responded to the West African military takeovers. And here is the part that breaks the whole narrative open. The leaders of those sanctioned countries are among the most talked about, most celebrated figures on the continent right now, especially among young Africans. Which brings us to the contradiction I genuinely don't believe we discuss enough. Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré came to power through a military takeover in 2022. Now, under EU rules, that's automatic suspension. ECOWAS sanctions followed quickly. And yet, spend 10 minutes on African social media. Talk to young people in Francophone Africa. Watch conversations happening across the continent. Traoré is not being described as a problem. He's been described as someone who expelled French forces, who's building things, who speaks directly to what ordinary people are actually frustrated about. Military takeovers are genuinely dangerous. Military rule creates instability. That's true and worth saying clearly. But here is the analytical question I can't stop asking. If the AU has no clear mechanism to say to an elected government, you have become so corrupt, so captured, that you have crossed the line, then what option does a frustrated population have? The AU protects constitutional order, but it has almost no tool to protect constitutional legitimacy. You see, that is not a small difference. That gap right here is where military takeovers happen. And that gap connects directly to what's actually on the table right now and what's still missing from it. Because most coverage just skipped this part. In February 2026 at the AU Summit, he formally presented his reform report. Key points: harmonize the peace and security structures so they stop working in separate silos. Scale AU Peace Fund from $400 million to $1 billion. Push the African Court of Justice to actually become operational. Revive the Pan-African Parliament through the Malabo Protocol. Better early warning systems on conflicts before they explode. This is real work. I want to acknowledge that genuinely. And here is what is not in Ruto's package. And this is where it matters most if you care about ordinary people's lives. There is no EU-style annual rule of law review. The kind where an independent panel, chosen by merit, not by governments, scores every single AU member state on judiciary independence, press freedom, corruption, separation of powers, published publicly, so that every citizen can see their country score. Every journalist can ask why. You see, in some countries, the president controls all three arms of government, meaning in those countries, a president cannot be impeached by parliament. The president in some countries have the power to dissolve parliament. You see, there is no automatic ladder of consequences when elected governments quietly dismantle democracy from the inside. A warning, targeted sanction, suspension with clear, transparent criteria, not backroom deals between head of states who are protecting each other. There is no binding path to turn the African Free Continental Trade Area into a real single market. A Nigerian entrepreneur making tiles shouldn't have to certify their products separately in every African country before they can sell across the continent. Certified once, legal everywhere. That's what a real market looks like. We are not there. You see, these are the kinds of things that affect you and me directly, and not those protecting themselves at the AU. You see, the reforms on the table will make the current system run better, but they won't change who the system fundamentally serves. And that's not just a structural problem. It shows up in the most concrete, embarrassing way possible in how Africa handles its own conflicts. In 2025, Donald Trump publicly claimed he was the one who made progress on the Congo-Rwanda situation. The conflict in Eastern DRC is one of the deadliest crises on this continent. Millions displaced, communities shattered for years, and the AU has a Peace and Security Council, conflict prevention frameworks, mediation mechanisms, yet the loudest claim of credit came from Washington. Look, outside mediation isn't always bad. Sometimes it genuinely moves things. I won't pretend otherwise, but the real question is this: why is Africa's peace again being negotiated from outside the continent? The answer is what we have been building towards the entire time. When your institution is underfunded, structurally weak, and dependent on political will of members who often prefer bilateral deals over continental ones, other people walk into that space, and once they are in that space, they stay. You see, the reform conversation is not abstract. It's about whether Africa negotiates its own peace, manages its own crisis, sets its own terms, whether it keeps waiting for a phone call from outside to get things moving. And that takes us straight to the hardest question of all. Let me bring this home. The AU was born from a real dream. Kwame Nkrumah's dream, Nyerere's dream, Selassie's dream. A united Africa, one voice, a continent of 1.5 billion people that finally has the weight it deserves. That dream is real, and it is worth every bit of the fight. But I want to ask you something. Can the same people who benefit from a weak AU actually build a stronger one? Can leaders who have spent decades consolidating power at home genuinely build institutions designed to check the same power at the continental level? I don't say that to be dark about it. I genuinely believe some of them can. History has surprised us before, and Ruto taking this assignment seriously deserve to be acknowledged. But here is what I know for certain. What changes the AU is not the speeches in Addis Ababa. What changes the AU is what happens when citizens demand it. When African academics, civil society, Diaspora communities, yes, you, wherever you're watching from, stay informed, stay consistent. The EU becomes what Africans demand it to become, not what external donors fund it to be, not what presidents find comfortable, what you demand. Now here's my actual challenge to you, and I mean this. Not just drop a comment. Go look whether your country is paying its EU contributions on time. Go look up whether your government has ratified the Malabo Protocol, the one that gives the Pan-African Parliament real legislative powers. Then ask your representative why or why not. That's how a constitutional institution stops being a president's club and starts being a people's institution, one question at a time. My name is Asongwed Louis. You're watching Africa Today, and this is the Strategic Lens. If you haven't liked the video, I don't know what you're waiting for. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, we are about to hit 500,000 subscribers, and we really want that figure very fast. Right now we are at 470,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that button so that we reach that target very fast. See you in my next video. Bye.